So before we begin, I would just like to shout out my patrons, Dudley Reiner, Crimson, Project Mercury, Damocus Whitewood, and Consular. And if any of you want to support me on Patreon, you can always find the link in the description below.
Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I decided to do the hand trap tier list again because we are almost officially in the Power of the Elements format, and of course a couple things are going to change. And since we haven't really hit the format yet, this is only like an outlook to the future. So this is what I think will happen, this is what I think will be useful. And for the tiers, we have the usual ones, the staple, good, decent, and not worth it. And we also have the usual hand traps. So please let me know what you think of this tier list, what you sort of think my predictions are for which hand traps are going to be played, and yeah, overall your opinions as always in the comments down below. So let's go ahead and get started. For the first one, we have Ashe. I'm just going to put it in staple. Like, Ashe is, I wouldn't say it's that impactful against every single deck, but you know, you have that possibility of hitting almost every single deck with it. So even if the power of Ashe is not going to be that great, and it's not like you're always going to be ashing the Brand Diffusion or the Chaos Space, like something that just feels really good, unless you play into Gamma. But besides that, you know, maybe you're just going to be using Ashe as like a combination of Ashe and another hand trap. Maybe you're just going to be using it to sort of stop your opponent in their tracks and then be able to beat their board. Like, sometimes Ashe is just that backbone that your strategy has if you happen to draw into it, and with the help of it you're able to prevail. So even though it's not that powerful against every single matchup because of how generic it is, like I pretty much said, that's why I think it should be a staple. And also a quick point I want to make, we're moving to a format where it's going to be very much dependent whether or not you're focusing on going second cards on board breakers in your main deck, or you play a lot of hand traps, because we're going to need a lot of hand traps to be able to counter, almost forgot the word, to be able to counter the best decks. So when you need like a huge array of hand traps or going second cards, something that's very generic, that it's able to sort of always hold their own in a matchup, I think is very important. So that's why I think Ashe is going to be staple still moving forward. And then for the next one, we actually have DD Crow, and it's going to be a staple as well. I think DD Crow is going to be so strong against the tier limit deck. If you hit the monster that's activating the effect in the graveyard to be able to perform the fusion summon, if you get rid of it, it resolves without effect because it needs to return itself to the deck as well with the other fusion materials. So if you get rid of it, that's just it. And you're able to do it like, you know, if there's a lot of effects activating because your opponent milled a couple of names, you're still able to chain DD Crow and get rid of it. Whereas if you have something like Ghost Bell, you know, when you need to like negate the activation, immediately chain it, it can be chain blocked. So when you use a card like Ghost Bell, and I guess we can address it since we're talking about it, I'm not sure if I want to put it in good or top of decent. I think I'll leave it in like somewhere towards the bottom half of good. And next to it, we have Skullmeister as well. Now, let's put this one next to it for the time being, but I might move it. I don't know, I'm not such a huge fan of Skullmeister because I think it's a bit too specific. Let's move it to top of decent. Like, Bell is really nice because it has a bit more implication. So let's just leave it at that. And what I wanted to say is DD Crow, Skullmeister, and Ghost Bell do virtually the same thing, but DD Crow is able to do it like whenever and just remove the thing itself when it comes to Ronin Totem, which is huge. When it comes to like even getting rid of an Enchantress is not bad. Like if they do it from hand, then yeah, it is what it is. But if they mill it or if they discard it off of something and you DD Crow it, that's really nice. Like that's strong, I think. And you have a couple implications against the dragon deck, and like you're able to find a thing DD Crow can be used against in pretty much every single of the top decks, excluding like Sword Soul maybe. You know, you could get rid of a couple things, but I don't think the impact is really there. But, you know, we also need to take into account that Sword Soul might not be that was weird, that Swordsoul might not be as represented. So when you have Splight and Tearlament and you have a lot of implication there, I think this is still going to make DD Crow a staple. So there's that. And I guess we touched upon Bell and Skullmeister as well. I think they're both okay, but they're not as great. So there's that. And then we have Contact C. Together with it, we can address Retaliating C as well. Like, both of them are just not worth it. They're way too specific to be used right now, especially moving to the format, which hasn't been explored yet, and it's only getting tested out. And a very specific card like this, I don't think has any place right now, or like these two, I should say. I don't think they really have any place. They don't have implications, and they're just not that great. Then we have the like, why do I why do I leave this card in still? So obviously it's not worth it, and we're just going to leave it in the not worth it category. No one is afraid of Joy-Chan at this point, I think, or even if they are, they won't be, actually citing a card like this in, let alone main deck it. Like, if you're using Droll maybe against a couple different matchups, that's okay, but yeah, this one is just, it's not worth it. Then the next one, we have Chaos Hunter. Now, Chaos Hunter is it's weird, because you hear a lot of different opinions on it, but I genuinely think it's decent. And I think I'll put it quite high. So obviously, it's a good implication against Splight. If Splight is not able to banish, you don't need to worry about. Totally awesome. And it also has a big body. So what they need to do is they need to beat over it with Gigantic Splight, which of course is possible. But if you don't take that into account, like, it's still a body they need to deal with. And if they're not able to banish, you sort of stop a couple of their plays. So, it's a bit too specific. And I think not many people will actually use it due to the fact it's that specific. But I don't think it's bad, if you know what I mean. Like, I still think it's okay if someone actually just wants to play it. And it's also budget. So, like, if you don't exactly, have the means to acquire every single hand trap, you can play something like this and still do quite well. So there's a couple of thoughts I have on Chaos Hunter. And then we have D-Shifter. And I'll actually put it like at the top of good. I think D-Shifter is going to be very strong, especially against Tearlaments. And Flunder, of course, is able to run it, and they have no problem with that. Then you have Exosister, which is sort of an underdog of the format. I still don't think it's going to be that great, but if you are a Tearlament player and you run into that Exosister player, then D-Shifter is really going to punish you. And there are also decks that are able to run D-Shifter. Like, if you think about it, like, even Swordsoul can do it. That's like a bit specific. Even Splight can do it. So, like, you have decks that might actually side it, and you have some rogue strategies that can just easily play it and have no issue with that. So when you have, more than just one deck that's able to run a card like this and actually be able to completely shut one of the best strategies off, I think that's really nice. So not exactly a staple, but I think somewhere towards the like middle of good, I guess, should be fine. So the next one is going to be Droll. And I still think Droll is quite nice. Like, I'm really not against Droll. If I'm being totally honest with you, I don't think that's that bad. Hold on, let me just rearrange everything a bit. So I think Droll should stay at the top of good for now. We might stack a couple things on top of it. But Droll has so many implications. And with Droll, I think it's specific to the point where if you know the kind of meta you're going to be playing at your personal tournament, then I think it's going to be very strong. So if you know you have, let's say, Adventure Dragonling, Joy-Chan, Flunder, even Despia, like you have a lot of decks that Droll can effectively counter. And if you know you're going to an event like this, then you just might want to reserve a couple spots in your side deck for Droll. So it really depends on the kind of event you're going to, the kind of, I guess, meta you're going to be playing at, because it's not great against Splight or Tearlament. So that's why I think it's like somewhere towards the middle of good. Like, everything is a bit weird because we don't really know how represented those decks are actually going to be. But yeah, I guess hopefully people don't just skip to the end of this video and they actually listen to my reasoning, because it really depends on the kind of decks you sort of think are going to be facing. So there's that. Then we have Gamma. And I think Gamma is going to be a staple. It's incredibly strong against the best 2 decks, and we still have so many other decks. So when you're using Gamma and you draw it going second actually, and you don't have any monsters, then you're able to just throw it at so many different decks. And for the most part, decks are going to be very much reliant on like going, normal summon effect. You hit it, they pass. Like a couple of decks work in that way, and there are, of course, extenders, but I think Gamma can shut a lot of strategies completely off. And then pair that up with the fact that together with E-Tally, it's an incredible addition to the Splice deck itself as an extender. So when you have a card that's actually a very good hand trap and an extender as well, like I think that's busted by itself. And I'm fairly certain it's going to be a staple moving forward, and it's going to see a lot of main deck play. And then we have Dogwood. Like, I don't know, like it's just cheesy and it's not worth it, and no one is going to dedicate their slots to this card. Like if side decks were huge or if they were unlimited, then yeah, sure, by all means just play it, but since they're not, no one is actually going to run it, in my opinion. And then we have No Material. Now this one is really interesting because it actually saw play, which I didn't expect at all, but I did see a list that was able to top with it, and I think No Material, it's like, let's just put it in decent, maybe like somewhere down here, because I think it's very interesting, but it's a bit too specific. Like similarly to something like Dogwood, when I said that you're not going to be dedicating your side deck slots, you probably won't be dedicating them to No Material either, because when it used to be played like back in TOS format, like you knew you're going to be able to use it against, not against, like in almost every single round, because you're going to face a deck like this. But right now, when we have such a varied, unexplored meta, and you have No Material that's useful against a very, very specific thing, then it's just not worth it at that point. Even though I really, really like the card and I think it's incredible because it's such a specific hand trap, but yeah, it's sadly not as great as I would maybe want it to be. Then we have Impermanence. I guess let's just address Impermanence and Veiler together. I don't know, like, do we want to put it like somewhere towards the bottom of good? Maybe, and like Veiler somewhere towards the top of decent. Like it's just not that great, Like essentially, what are you going to be using it against? Splice is going to prevent targeting. Tearlament is going to throw a window at you at the middle of your turn, so you will have cards on board. You won't be able to use Impermanence. So at that point, you're better off playing something like Dark Ruler, a Chalice Droplet, so not a hand trap. Veiler, like it's just it's not that impactful when you'd be negating an effect but not destroying it. So if you leave that level 2 monster on the field and they're able to special summon the other ones when it comes to Splice, like you didn't really do anything. So that's why I think those 2 cards are not that great. Like maybe Impermanence is a bit better because it's still good as the 6th card if you're going up against any kind of combo deck. But yeah, Veiler, like, I don't know, both of them are kind of not that great right now, which feels weird. And then next to those 2, I also want to touch upon Mourner, because I think Mourner is going to be a bit better. I'll actually put it like, let's put it next to Ghostbell. So the reason being that you can negate pretty much anything they throw at you, that being Winda, Scythe, which is still very much present in the meta, and you can control cards. It can be whatever, whenever, and you can just throw that at it because it's only on a special summon. So if you want to negate something like a Winda or Scythe, you're able to do it and nothing is preventing you, like in the case of Impermanence or Veiler. So it's weird. It feels very weird to be moving to a meta in which like Mourner is going to be better, but I can't say I'm really against it. I don't know. We'll see. Then we have sorry. Then we have Lancia. Let's just put it not worth it. Now this feels incredibly weird because we have played Lancia like for the longest time, and I always like, it's just this thing that you just keep in your side deck ever since, I don't know, Orcust, I guess, ever since the Orcust meta, like Lancia just never left the side deck. But right now, for a couple months, it just really hasn't seen play, and there's nothing to use it against. Like, the only deck that actually banishes would be Flunder, and you're not going to be using Lancia to counter Flunder. So yeah, that's it. Like, yeah, you have Virtual World. I'm not disregarding Virtual World, although maybe I am just a tiny bit because it's not that great, so you're not going to be siding Lancia. So yeah, it's not worth it. Then we have Nibiru. Now this one is going to be interesting, to say the least. I will put it at the top of good. I think Nibiru is going to be strong moving forward, but it's going to be dependent, like I always say, like I keep repeating myself every single time. It's legit the same thing. It depends on the event you're going to, on the meta that you're going to be playing in. And it also depends, like, you shouldn't generalize everything. Like, if you're going to a regional or a local and you know people are not going to have Splight or Tearlament in such a big number, like, just play Nibiru. Like, even main deck it if you want, but I would suggest siding it at least because we still have a very varied meta, so you might be able to use it against a lot of different things, like Sword Soul, like Salamangreat, like Marincess. You have a lot of implication, and I get that Gigantic Splight prevents you from using it. But yeah, like, also when it comes to Gamma, you need to think about that because Gigantic Splight prevents you from actually summoning out Driver as well. So you need to keep that in mind and be able to, if you're able to, that's what I want to say, disrupt them as soon as possible. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then we have Ghost Ogre, and it's actually going to go in the staple category as well. And it's so cool to see because it was great in the adventure heavy format, and then it wasn't that great anymore, and right now it is again. I'm a huge fan of Ghost Ogre because of its specific effect. So yeah, when it comes to Gigantic Splight, it needs to detach for effect, so if you're able to use Ghost Ogre, that's huge. We still have the adventure stuff present, and it's just really, really nice. It's very applicable, and maybe against Tearlament, not so much, but when you have such a strong deck like Splight, like anything adventure, and you still have implications, I think it's worth running a card like this. I have no idea why I stuttered that hard right now, but yeah, you know what I mean. Then the next one is going to be Phantasme. I don't know, like, I think I'll put it in decent. I think all of the cards in decent are very interesting, and I think Phantasme is going to be a bit better because we're actually moving to a meta in which a link deck is going to be used, because right now we had Despia, and yeah, there's like Adventure Synchro, but they synchro summon more than they link, and then I guess Dragon Link synchro summons more than its Sword Soul, than Tearlament, of course, fusion summons. But with Splight, you know, we are able to actually use Phantasme. Now, I still think it's a bit too specific, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I think it's like one of those cards. And similarly to it, I think Cherry, let's just put it next to it, actually. I think Winter Cherries is one of those cards that, like, similarly to something like Chaos Hunter, when I said that if you want a card that's quite accessible and it's able to do the job very well if you're up against a specific strategy, then you can side it. Like, by all means, at the end of the day, you can play whatever you want. If you see ways of incorporating that stuff into your strategy, if you have enough space in the extra deck, of course, or even side deck, like if you have enough side deck slots to actually side targets and cherries, more power to you. You know, you can do that. But yeah, I think it's cool, but I think it's a bit too specific when we actually need to run that many hand traps to be able to counter strategies, and you also need to take into account how varied the meta is going to be, so you need to have a lot of them, and then it's going second cards, and at that point you just run out of space, and you need to like take into account the back row removal stuff as well, and like going first cards, and you have what's it called? D-barrier. I completely like blanked out on it. You know, you have D-barrier, you have anti-spell, and then you're on 15 cards that, you know, just like this, and there's no space for cherries. So yeah, I guess it's nice, but a bit too specific. And for the last one, the Lonely Token Collector down here, honestly, like, I don't know, like, somewhere down here. Like, it's not gonna be that great. I think it's, I don't know, let's put it over here next to Valor, I guess. Or maybe let's do it at the top of Decent, because we all know it's great against Swordso and it's great against adventure stuff. But then we need to ask ourselves how many of these decks are actually still going to be seeing play. So they are one of the best decks, right? A couple of the best decks. So probably the players running them are going to move on to the new best decks, which are going to be Splight and Tearlament. Token Collector is not great against those decks, and you don't have that much space in your side decks. So if you think like, oh, I'm not going to be seeing any kind of Swordso stuff, adventure stuff going on, you're just not going to use Token Collector, and that makes total sense. So the card is nice, but I don't think it's going to be seeing play simply because those decks are not going to be seeing that much play. But that's not taking any kind of power away from them, but I think it's more so the fact that representation, like the amount of representation, is going to significantly lower itself. So hopefully that makes sense. Looking at this tier list, like it's very interesting. I think we have a lot of things in Decent because we're not quite sure how everything is going to evolve. So I guess looking at it one more time, I don't think there's anything that should be moved anywhere else. I think I'm quite satisfied. So please let me know what you think. Hopefully you enjoyed. I always love making these tier lists, and I love discussing everything with you in the comments. So yeah, you know, talk to me and like the video, of course, if you liked it. Sub to the channel, check out all of the social media, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.